Can you start a podcast with me, please? I need something to do.
Pastrnak sent it out in front of Malkin to save. They score! Elias Lindholm looks to the heavens.
Here's a chance. Potter right in on goal. He scores. Oh my! What a move by the rookie.
2-on-1. Pastrnak moving in with Marchand. Get it to it. Score!
The zone. Coyle dances in. Backhand score!
Lindholm right wing corner. Pastrnak is there. He scores! David Pastrnak wins it for Boston.
Welcome in, everyone, to another episode of Bruins Tape to Tape. I will be your host today. I am Maria from Watertown. Before I introduce my lovely co-host, I just want to give you a little bit of background on what we're doing this summer. We're continuing our series of revisiting the Boston Bruins roster in terms of who may stay, who may go, those we might want to keep, what our projections might have been early on in the season for some of the roster players and where things ended up. Today, for this episode, our profile will be on Victor Arvidsson. So with that being said, welcome in, my friend Caroline. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. I'm excited to come back to Victor Arvidsson because he was one that I think we were really excited about and we didn't really know a ton of. And I think I'm pretty happy with how that one turned out.
I think we are both going to be patting ourselves on the back to some degree because we did a profile on Victor Arvidsson back in August of 2025. And again, we didn't know a whole lot about him. We knew of him, but because he predominantly played the majority of his career with the Nashville Predators and then spent a little bit of time with the Edmonton Oilers, we didn't get to see a lot of Arvidsson. I'm going to let you be the leadoff hitter with regard to what we said then and where we are now with Victor.
Yeah, I love this pickup. So as a brief overview, we got him technically as a trade, although it really felt like a free agency signing because I believe it even was announced in the morning of July 1st before free agency opened up at noon that day. Like you said, this is a player who has spent, if not all, majority of his career out west. He also had a stint in LA, and that was one of the things that we had
forgot about that. Yeah.
That was one of the things that we had discussed about his ability to fit in with whatever Marco Sturm's system was going to look like because they had that personal connection from both of them being in LA at the same time. It certainly felt like Arvidsson wanted out of Edmonton and Edmonton was in a we need to shed some cap space situation. And so it worked out for both of them because Arvidsson had to sign off on leaving and where he would go, and he chose Boston. So another reason why it felt a little bit like a free agency signing, not just because of the timing. He came in fairly cheap. He had a 2-year contract for $4 million for each year in Edmonton. And of course, then the second year was in Boston.
And there was a trade. The Bruins turned over a 2027 fifth round pick. I don't know what the value of that pick is, but I think the Bruins made out okay. At this point,
the Bruins, I think, were pretty fine with doing that because that was certainly a cap shed situation for Edmonton. And I think the only potential downside that we could even assume with Victor Arvidsson coming in was a little bit his age. He's 33. So for a forward, you might start to see a little bit of slippage in terms of speed and agility and recovery. And that piece was the biggest question mark, which was, is he going to be healthy? He had some back issues in the past and he's missed some time in the past. And so that was really the only question mark. On the flip side,
he hasn't played legitimately close to a full season since 2016, 2017 with Nashville. He played 80 games, and then it's been a slow kind of missing games since then, even with the Bruins this season.
But it was the most that he's played in a while. In 2023, that was the year he only played 18 games. That was the significant surgery year. So he was there for 3 seasons and only 1 season with Edmonton. I assume that they wanted to bring him in for all the same reasons that I think anyone would want to bring someone like him in. I think he's a little bit of a dark horse, and I think that's also how we perceived him coming in. And having spent an entire season watching him, I would even still call him a dark horse, especially compared to other members of the Boston Bruins. But he turned out to be a very reliable player and someone that you could expect to be clutch in a lot of really important situations, not just the fact that he was able to be a part of a line that was almost unchanged all season because of just how well they worked together, and that being the line that was centered by Pavel Zacha, and then he shared a wing position with Casey Middlestat. Now,
and that line, let us just add, because this is very important to note, at one point during the regular season, that trio was probably the Bruins' best line, but they were one of the best lines in hockey. They were at a pretty good clip.
Yeah. And one of the other things that I really enjoyed about him, and I will say, I don't know if we actually touched on this, besides his speed, he's got an excellent skating ability and his ability to enter the zone, a pretty reasonable shooting percentage. 9.3 is what he actually ended up with at the end of this season. And the percent of shots on net was almost 64%. So he was certainly not afraid to take shots. His predicted shooting talent is above average for the season. And I think what should not be shocking whatsoever, one of the newer metrics that we've been discussing as of late and will continue to discuss, because I think this is really important when we're considering that trades are going to be coming and free agency is going to be coming and who's going to be leaving and who's going to be coming in, and considering, can you get someone better than what you currently have, is the goals above replacement and the wins above replacement and the standings points above replacement. So how much does this player contribute to the team with goals, to wins, and points in the standings? And should be no surprise whatsoever who is number one pretty much across the board. It's David Pastrnak, obviously. He's the most talented player on the team. But number 2 for goals above replacement, Victor Arvidsson. He had a tremendous year. He had an incredible impact. Even though he didn't play 82 games, his ability to be impactful in the time that he was on ice was significant. And I really am wondering what is going to happen with him and his contract, because I'm not sure what else the front office is actually looking for and what they want. Now, are they hoping that they can get someone who is maybe statistically more like him, but for less, or who is younger, they can have for a lot longer? But I will say that we have not seen a consistent veteran presence on this team in years. We've talked about the last 5 seasons as being a little bit more chaotic, more volatile, because there hasn't been that steady Eddie presence that we saw for the previous 15 seasons. We've seen a variety of players come in to serve that role, but they've never stuck around for more than 2 seasons, right? Because they do tend to be older players. These are the guys who've seen everything. Arvidsson's been to the Stanley Cup final. He was with Edmonton when they lost the second time to the Panthers. So I don't really know what they're thinking in terms of contract extensions or whatnot. And as we get closer and closer, I worry that they're going to have him walk. He's a high energy transition driving middle 6 winger. He brings a lot of pace, which Boston does not have much of. Good forechecking pressure, a ton of shot generation, offensive zone movement and chaos. That's something that we need. But he's not a playmaker per se.
He's not flashy, but he does his job. He does his job. He works hard. Mm-hmm. He's responsible with the puck. He's got good speed. He's got good hands. He has, as you stated a shoot first mentality, which is was sorely needed by this team. We're not going to do any revisionist history because it's already hot enough in my office today. I don't want to get myself all worked up. But in 69 games, if you had told me that in just even playing 69 games, Victor Arvidsson would have contributed 25 goals and 29 assists, that's not even playing a full season. So this player definitely has value. Now, the pros and cons of that is another team might see that value as well, and that could translate into a bigger payday for Victor Arvidsson, and not a payday that the Bruins can ill afford to fall into, perhaps. I would like him not to be a casualty of a roster that has limited financial flexibility right now.
Yeah, it's what is his ask from his camp? I'm sure that money and term are obviously the biggest sticking points because that's basically all these contracts are. $4 million.
Right, yeah.
And if you think about who else is out there as a forward, you've got someone like Charlie Coyle, who, again, this is a pro Charlie Coyle podcast. However, the Columbus Blue Jackets just offered him an absolutely astonishing extension for someone who is mostly suited for the third line, can perform well second line. So again, a middle six forward.
But remind our listeners of Charlie's deal, because I want to point out some subtle differences.
It's a 6-year, $6 million AAV contract. And look.
And Charlie's how old?
And Charlie is basically the same. He's 34 years old, and Victor Arvidsson is he just turned 33. So they're the same age. Now, granted, there might be listeners who may say, but Charlie is a center and Arvidsson is a wing. All right, but we're still talking about a middle six player with they have different skill sets. All the players have different skill sets.
But Charlie has longevity. And when I say longevity, he is a workhorse. He very rarely misses games for any significant period of time. And he has also established himself as a leader. He was a leader on that Columbus Blue Jackets team. I believe that he exhibited leadership qualities while he was here in Boston. He never was rewarded for that with being provided with an A. And I don't even know how often he got an alternating A when someone was out, which sometimes I found a little, kind of left a little sour taste in my mouth on occasion. But that's where I see the differences in those players, is that Charlie's going to be there game after game. Now, where Victor, he's got this history now, he's going to miss 10, 15 games a year, if not more than that. You could maybe work that into the equation for a reasonable contract with reasonable term. What I don't want to see the Bruins do is take a 33-year-old forward and give him 6 or 7 years. That's crazy. You can't, and I don't think that they would, but
there are some crazy contracts out there. As we have discussed in previous episodes already, namely the various Lindholm contracts that will put middle late 30s.
Honestly, if I had a choice in this situation, if both Elias Lindholm, and I know Elias is a center and Victor is not a center, but if I had to pick and both players were in the same situation, sorry, I'm going to make Victor Arvidsson a priority over Elias Lindholm. That's just how I feel about what those players have brought to this roster.
Yeah. And for Victor Arvidsson, who does this team want to be? Because it's not just what veteran presence is going to be there that's going to be a constant or a consistent voice in the room to assist the leadership core, because no matter who ends up as captain, the leadership core is still younger. And although Pasternak is turning 30, but what are they going to try and prioritize? Is it going to be that defensive structure? They're going to aim to have those shutdown games where that's very minimal scoring? Or are they going to start to try and invest in more goal scorers? Because if that's the case, then there has to be a very good reason why they would not re-sign Victor Arvidsson, because he not only, like we said, his shooting percentage is very high with that shot first mentality. He absolutely performed in a way in regards to the number of goals that he scored and his expected goals. The guy is a sniper. He was one of the top goal scorers. He clearly makes a measurable and meaningful impact on the team's ability to score goals.
Listen, what have we been crying about and whining about for years? Years. Lack of secondary scoring, lack of secondary scoring. Now, it did dry up in the playoffs. All scoring dried up in the series against Buffalo. To me, it was somewhat, I don't want to say significant, but problematic when Victor Arvidsson went down with his injury too. I think that had an impact on what the Bruins were or weren't able to do against the Sabres.
And his impact with the wins above replacement, he has a 2.1 wins above replacement and 4 standing points, which means it's effectively the same thing, that if you were to bring in some other average player or replacement player, he was contributing and making 2 more wins happen than you would expect under other circumstances. That's 4 more points. And in an Atlantic division that is arguably the best, most competitive division in the entire league, every single stinking point matters. Every goal matters. And so what is the alternative? I don't know. But his overall impact on the game elevated, I think, the product on the ice when it comes to the Boston Bruins, because it's either been, for the last couple of years, flat or a bit of a circus in not a good way. And so he brought in a level of play, a quality of play where you saw very positive territorial play, a lot of offensive driving value that he brought to the table. And I really hope that we don't lose this guy.
No, yes, I agree with you. I would like them to keep him. I see more upside than downside other than the injury factor with him. I guess what you can say about him is that at least it's not the same injury over and over again. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Whereas with Elias Lindholm, all we keep hearing about, even from the day, even before he even got here, we keep hearing about this back injury that keeps hindering his play or his ability to play up to the level that we were expecting him to play.
Yeah, exactly.
And it sounds like I'm going at Elias Lindholm, and maybe I am a little bit, because even when he wasn't, or we didn't hear about the back injury, there were stretches where he was invisible. And I don't see that in Victor Arvidsson. I think we were excited about what this guy could bring to the table.
Yes.
And to me, he proved himself worthy, or he has proven himself worthy of getting another contract from the Bruins at a reasonable price. Now, he's got to factor in as well, right? He's 33 years old. He has a difficult time playing a full season. If he likes it well enough here in Boston, and by all accounts, it sounds like he does, and he did, let's meet in the middle here and make a deal.
Agreed. So I would like to certainly see him come back. If not, then the Bruins are going to have to try and find somebody who can drive the puck the same way, who is going to
But now you've got another hole in your already hole-filled roster. Right.
Who else can Boston bring in then who has the same level of pace, that forechecking pressure, transition, offense, possession driving, someone who's strong on the puck? We've got a number of players on the Bruins team that they can get the puck, but they can't keep the puck because they just aren't strong.
And if you're Arvidsson and his agency, you're obviously going to use that to your advantage, right? This might be his last contract. Let's face facts, right? It could be. With that being said, you want to make it a good payday for yourself before you sail off into the sunset.
Exactly. So A+ to Victor Arvidsson this year.
No, A+ in my mind. See, I'm a hard agree. No, because he didn't get a full season. I would give him an A+ for
but I guess
But I'm like A minus, B plus, A minus, B plus.
For me, the reason why I'm giving him such a high rating is because of just how efficient he was when he was there.
I'm just like, it's hard for me to give anybody on the Bruins roster an A plus. I just think that is like a standard of the level of performance is through the roof.
Yeah.
Right.
But also knowing they knew all of that going into the season. And I think if you look at him from the lens of we know he's injury prone, that it is a possibility, but he made a significant impact while he was there. And I think I hesitate to think for as stupid as we think the front office is most of the time, you know that he's going to be likely injury prone. There has to be a plan. There has to be something to manage that. So those things considered, A plus trade, let's see a reasonably good signing or at least someone who can do what he has
So that's
done.
valid. The trade itself, the grade on the trade, yes, I will grant you that. That is definitely an A plus because you got a very serviceable, steady, reliable. And when I say reliable, when he's on the ice, he's reliable.
You know what you're going to get, and he
right.
gives
You know what you're going to get for a draft pick that may not amount to anything. And we know, given the way that the Bruins staff assesses young talent, we could have given away a diamond in the rough because they're too numb to see one when they're scouted. So,
yeah. And I would argue actually that Arvidsson probably even overperformed a little bit, or at least maybe not. I certainly didn't expect the amount of goal scoring, but I have to imagine the scouts knew what he's capable.
No, that was a nice find by Marco Sturm to put that group together. And Pavel Zacha certainly, most definitely benefited from that. Let's not forget the fact too, it sounds like from what's already percolating in the rumor mill that the Bruins are making Pavel Zacha a priority in terms of extending him, and what that contract may be could have an impact on what you do with Arvidsson.
Could. It certainly could. You've also got still one more year of Casey Middlestat. His contract is a 5.75 cap hit. It's not a cheap line by any stretch.
No.
But if you think about it, the number of points that line scored certainly exceeded what we were saying was a requirement from the second line by.
That line basically got the goaltending, and that line basically got them into the playoffs the second half of the season late. I would say late. So.
Yeah. And Zacha, he's eligible for a contract extension in July at $475. I think you're very correct in your assumption that if they see him as staying part of the Boston Bruins for another stretch of time,
it sounds like when you read between the lines, listening to Neely and Sweeney, that they want Pavel Zacha to be a part of this rebuild and this kind of core nucleus that you're going to work around.
Yep. Yeah. So we shall see. It's also entirely possible then ultimately what ends up happening is that there's just no room. But
I hope that's not the case, but
I definitely want to see more players like him come into Boston's orbit.
I think we should preface that first by saying what I want to see first is have a clear, concise definition of what kind of team you want to be. The going back and forth from one extreme to another. Let's cut the shit now and decide what you want to be as an organization and how you want to play and define it and get players, for the most part, that play within that system and structure. But we'll see if that comes to fruition. So I think all in all, we're both in agreement that Victor Arvidsson was a success on the Bruins. We would like to see him return in a Bruins uniform for a reasonable price and a reasonable term.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So thank you for listening, folks. We're going to continue with these brief little player profiles as the off season builds up to free agency. In the meantime, please feel free to give us a rating or a review. You can find us on our social medias. You can also find us on our Substack at tape2tapemk.substack.com and our other social media at tape to tape. Closing. Any closing thoughts, my friend?
Go Bees.
Go Bruins.